Have you ever, opened the calculator app on your phone and just stared at it for 3 straight minutes? Like, pretending to do complex math just to avoid speaking to someone in a foreign language?
Oh, absolutely. It is a very highly specific survival tactic.
Right.
Honestly, looking at the materials for today's deep dive, it reminded me of a very personal moment.
Oh, really? Wait, you've actually done the calculator thing?
Oh, yeah. I once sat in an office furiously typing, 7 times 8, clear, 9 minus 2, clear, just desperately hoping my colleagues would think I was way too busy to do English small talk.
That is amazing. Did it work?
Well, eventually a coworker just leaned over and asked, "Are you doing taxes?" And my only response in a total panic was, "No, I am emotionally unavailable today."
Oh my goodness, that is painfully relatable. But, it perfectly captures the mission of our deep dive today.
Yeah, it really does.
Because we are taking a stack of sources today to explore a very specific, paralyzing fear that millions of language learners face. And we are not talking about the fear of, failing a grammar test.
Right. No, this is much deeper than that.
Exactly. We are exploring that physical freezing panic of simply opening your mouth and speaking a second language. And our main guide today is the story of Sofia. Through her, we really want to figure out why our brains betray us in these moments.
Yeah, and more importantly, how we can finally unlock our ability to speak. And Sophia's story is just the perfect lens for this because she represents a really common paradox.
A paradox, how so?
Well, she is 28 years old, a highly educated civil engineer from Mexico, and she moved to Manchester about 8 months ago. And on paper, I mean, her English is excellent.
Right, the sources say she has what linguists call passive fluency, and we should probably define that because from the outside it looks incredibly successful.
Oh, completely. I mean, she goes home after work and watches Netflix without subtitles. She listens to these really complex English podcasts. She reads industry articles.
Yeah, and she even understands British jokes. And, understanding a culture's humor requires a really deep, nuanced grasp of tone. Her brain is clearly capable of processing high-level English.
It processes it beautifully. And when she arrives at work, her morning routine reflects that. She makes her coffee, sits at her desk, reads reports, answers emails.
But those are all passive tasks, right? Or at least tasks where she controls the speed. The breakdown only happens when she has to do real-time active speaking.
Exactly, the casual office chat. The sources describe this really specific morning. Her coworkers are standing by the coffee machine just chatting.
Right, and one of them mentions watching a terrible movie the night before, and another person asks how bad it was, and the coworker replies, "So terrible, my cat left the room."
Which is a great image. And everyone laughs. Sophia laughs too, but the sources make this really interesting note. She laughs about a half second later than everyone else.
And that half-second delay is crucial, isn't it?
It really is, because it represents the cognitive load her brain is carrying. She hears the words, translates the cultural meaning, processes the joke, and then physically laughs.
Wow, so she is doing, twice the mental work of her native-speaking colleagues just to keep up with the conversation.
Exactly. And then she decides she wants to participate. She wants
Yeah.
to fit in, so she searches her brain for a safe, universal topic, and she lands on the weather.
Always a safe bet in the UK, right?
Usually, yes. So she looks out the window at the clouds, tries to sound super casual, and says, "Nice weather today. It looks very, weather-ish."
Weather-ish. Oh, no.
Yeah, weather-ish. There's this brief pause, and then a really kind coworker smiles and says, "That's probably the most British sentence I've heard this week."
They were trying to be nice.
Hmm.
But internally, Sophia just feels completely humiliated. And, why is the gap between understanding a cat joke and making a sentence about the weather so huge?
It really comes down to the mechanics of passive consumption versus real-time creation. When you are listening, the information just flows toward you.
Right, your brain just has to catch it and decode it.
Exactly. But speaking, that requires your brain to build the whole structure from nothing. You have to select the vocabulary, apply the grammar, physically make the sounds,
Yeah.
all while people are staring at you.
It kind of reminds me of the difference between a food critic and a line cook.
Oh, I like that. How do you mean?
Well, with passive understanding, you are the food critic. You sit in a nice restaurant, someone hands you a beautiful dish, and you say, yes, the balance of salt here is perfect. You understand the meal perfectly.
Right. You know exactly what good food is.
Exactly. But speaking is like being thrown into a blazing hot commercial kitchen. The pans are on fire. Someone screams, "Cook this dish in 10 seconds, go!" You know what the food should taste like, but the pressure completely overwhelms you.
That is a perfect analogy. And it highlights the element of time, which is really the true enemy here. In casual conversation, That kitchen is moving at lightning speed.
There is just zero time to edit yourself.
None at all. So when Sophia's brain was under pressure to find an adjective for the weather, it just grabbed the noun, slapped ish on the end, and hoped for the best.
Which is honestly a highly creative survival mechanism, even if it felt like a total failure to her.
Yeah, but if casual humor stretches your brain, a professional meeting completely shatters it. Which brings us to the next big moment for Sophia.
Right, the 10 a.m. meeting. She is in a room with 8 colleagues and a projector. And this is where her professional identity really clashes with her language anxiety.
Completely. She is a civil engineer. She literally knows how to build bridges. But when her manager casually asks, Sophia, can you give us an update on the bridge project? Her brain registers a severe threat.
And her internal monologue here is so fascinating. Before she stands up, she is telling herself, easy. This is completely easy, no problem.
It's like a frantic attempt to override her own nervous system. But the nervous system usually wins.
Yeah, it does. When she stands up, she has a classic freeze response. It's not that she forgot her English, it's just a flood of cortisol, the stress hormone.
Exactly. Cortisol prioritizes immediate survival. It literally blocks access to the higher level parts of your brain where you store second language vocabulary.
The pathway to the words is just closed. So she tries to force her way through it. She looks at 8 professionals and slowly stammers, the project is progressing very projectly.
Projectly. Another brilliant panicked
A
invention.
brand new adverb. And the aftermath of this moment is so hard to read. Nobody laughed. Nobody rolled their eyes. They just sat in silence, waiting for her to finish.
And that silence was devastating. She sat back down feeling like she had lost all her professional credibility. Because as adults, we are used to being competent, you know?
Right, we are used to sounding intelligent and expressing complex thoughts.
Yeah. And when we speak a new language, we are temporarily reduced to the skills of a child. We lose our personality. And for a professional like Sophia, that vulnerability is just agonizing.
And that pain leads straight to what she does that night. She goes home, opens her laptop, and just desperately searches how to stop being afraid of speaking English.
Which is such a natural reaction.
Yeah.
But the search results are interesting.
Yeah, they give her endless grammar tutorials, videos on verb tenses, exact pronunciation lessons, and she watches like 3 of them and then just shuts the computer.
Because intuitively, she knows more information is not the cure here.
Exactly. I think we often treat a freeze response like a lack of knowledge. Like, oh, you hesitated. Here is a worksheet on past participles. But Sophia didn't say projectly because she doesn't know adverbs.
Right, she said it because she was in full emotional panic. The barrier is entirely psychological. She didn't need a teacher to explain grammar.
No, she needed someone to tell her that her intelligence wasn't defined by her English. She needed emotional support, not a textbook.
That distinction is so critical. You cannot solve an emotional block with a mechanical tool. If your brain thinks speaking English is a social danger, more vocabulary won't stop the cortisol.
You have to change the emotional association, and usually that help comes from someone who has survived the exact same panic. Which brings us to the office lunchroom the next day.
Yes. Sophia is sitting alone, just agonizing over the Projectly disaster. And a coworker named Raj sits down with her. He's a software developer from India.
And he lightly asks if she had a tough morning the day before. When Sophia asks if her panic was obvious, Raj says, only slightly. I've seen statues move more than you.
Which is just the perfect intervention. It deflates the tension immediately. By using a bit of humor, he normalizes the whole thing.
He does, but then he goes a step further and offers his own ultimate, most horrifying English mistake.
Oh, it is a phenomenal mistake. He tells Sophia about his first month in the UK. It was a hot day in the office, and he just wanted to tell his colleagues, I am hot.
But instead,
He confidently announced to the entire room, I am horny.
oh my goodness, no. And what was the reaction?
Well, according to Raj, his British colleagues just spent the next 2 weeks giving him very confused, overly polite smiles. He just thought they were exceptionally friendly people.
He had no idea what he had confessed. That is hilarious.
It really is. And I mean, it happens to all of us. When I was living in Spain, I did something incredibly similar at a supermarket.
Wait, really? What did you do?
Well, my Spanish was very basic. I was looking for eggs. And I couldn't remember the word for egg, so I just walked up to the clerk and asked, in very confident Spanish, where I could find the unborn chickens.
Unborn chickens. Oh no, how did they react?
The clerk just stared at me in total horror for a few seconds. pointed to aisle 4 and slowly walked away. It was deeply
Oh,
embarrassing.
wow. Yeah, the sources actually mentioned another one too, a guy named Lucas from Brazil. He had a classic false friend mistake.
Oh, let me guess. The embarrassed mistake.
Yes, he made a mistake in a meeting and he wanted to say, I'm embarrassed, but he used the Portuguese word embarazada. So he told his new boss, I am pregnant.
Oh, man. That is fantastic. But, these stories provide massive perspective.
Mm.
Suddenly, saying a project is moving projectly doesn't seem like a career-ending move.
Not compared to announcing your arousal or your pregnancy or asking for unborn chickens.
Exactly. And Raj gives Sophia this central insight of this whole deep dive. He tells her, nobody remembered my mistakes because they were all too busy worrying about their own.
That is such powerful advice, and it strikes right at the heart of the spotlight effect, doesn't it?
It does. The spotlight effect is this cognitive bias where we dramatically overestimate how much people are paying attention to us. We assume we are the center of everyone's universe.
Right. We feel like there is a bright spotlight shining on our every flaw. We assume everyone in the room is just mentally logging our grammar mistakes.
But the reality is so different. People have very limited working memory. While you were speaking, your colleagues are probably just thinking about their next point or a deadline or, lunch.
Listeners are incredibly self-focused. They are not acting as the grammar police. They are just scanning your words for the general meaning.
Exactly. As long as they understand your intent, their brains often autocorrect your mistakes without even realizing it.
And realizing that is the key to unlocking the speech center. Once Sophia realizes her colleagues aren't a panel of judges, the stakes just instantly drop.
Yeah, she realizes the goal isn't a flawless performance. The goal is just to transfer an idea from her brain to someone else's. So she decides to systematically change her routine. She starts her path to normal.
And her approach is basically systematic desensitization. She starts super small, just 5 minutes of low-stakes practice a day, eventually building up to 20 minutes.
Right. She stops using the app to order coffee and does it in person. She asks strangers for directions, knowing she will never see them again. She talks to her phone's voice assistant.
And my favorite part, she practices speaking English to her cat.
Which sounds completely absurd at first, right? But neurologically, it is actually brilliant.
Let's talk about why that works. She sits on the sofa, looks at the cat, and says, "Good morning, let me tell you about my bridge project." And the cat just falls asleep. Why is that effective?
Because she is isolating the physical act of speaking from the threat of social judgment. She is retraining her amygdala, the fear center of the brain.
So by moving her mouth, making the sounds, and hearing her own voice in a safe space, she is rewriting those negative associations.
Exactly. She is teaching her nervous system that speaking English does not equal danger. It is just a physical action, like walking.
And this consistent low-pressure exposure really pays off. The sources jump forward 3 months, back to the exact same meeting room, same colleagues, same projector.
And the manager asks Sophia for an update again. But this time, the physical response is entirely different. No flood of cortisol.
She stands up, opens her laptop, and she just delivers her update. She speaks clearly and naturally for 7 straight minutes.
And the best part is what happens when she finishes, which is essentially nothing.
It is a total anticlimax. No one claps, no one looks shocked. They just move on to the next agenda item.
And that lack of reaction is the greatest victory. Because it meant speaking English wasn't an event anymore. It wasn't a performance. It had finally just become normal.
Normal. It is such a simple word, but it is the ultimate goal. She didn't become flawless. She probably still made small mistakes in those 7 minutes, but she was understood. She belonged in the room.
And this brings up a profound point from the sources about how adults and children view fluency very differently. Adults often trap themselves in the illusion that fluency means perfection.
Right. We think we need to sound exactly like a dictionary.
But children have no concept of that. To a child, fluency just means being understood. If a kid points to a cup and says, "Me water want," and gets the water, that is a totally successful interaction.
Because fluency is connection. It is just the ability to bridge the gap between two people. You have to be willing to speak, even if your voice shakes. Or, invent a word like projectly, just to keep going.
And it raises a really interesting question. We spend so much energy trying to perfectly translate our native personality. But what if making mistakes actually reveals a more vulnerable, accessible version of you?
That is a fascinating thought.
Yeah, many learners find that once they drop the armor of perfection, their second language personality is actually warmer than their native one, just because they're forced to be open.
Does the friction of a new language make you more human? Raja's coworkers would definitely agree it makes you more memorable. And, we want to hear your memorable moments too.
We really do.
So if you were listening right now, head down to the comments section and share your own most embarrassing English mistake. We want to normalize the messy reality of learning. Sharing your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today.
I highly encourage you to embrace vulnerability and share those mistakes. However, as a final takeaway from today, while vulnerability is excellent, I do recommend double-checking your vocabulary before informing your entire office that you are horny. Just a professional tip.
A very vital piece of professional guidance to close on. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. Keep speaking, embrace the messy process, and we will catch you next time.